Good day, dear friends. Welcome to the Military Reporter channel. As always, we are closely monitoring the frontline situation in our daily updates. Today's report will be very interesting, so make sure to watch until the end because we will carefully analyze everything in detail. I will clearly demonstrate how ridiculous Zelensky's claim about the so-called Kursk operation by the Ukrainian armed forces is. I will prove it to you today. We will also analyze how the frontline configuration has changed since August 6 for the Ukrainian armed forces, and this will immediately show how Zelensky's statement has nothing to do with reality. Well, let's not waste time, let's open the map. The final stage of the Battle of Kursk is approaching. Yesterday, the Russian army achieved additional successes, not only in the Kursk region but also in the Sumy region. That's why the Ukrainian authorities announced a mandatory evacuation from 8 settlements in the Sumy region yesterday, because the Russian foothold here is expanding relentlessly. I'm talking about the Russian army's foothold. You can already see on the map that the total area of the foothold in the Sumy region has exceeded 40 square kilometers. Part of this territory remains a gray zone, but some areas, for example, the village of Novinkoy and the entire area to the west up to Basov, are under firm and undisputed control. Moreover, as the head of the Sumy Regional Military Administration stated yesterday, Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups, SRGs, are already penetrating the region across the entire border. I literally told you about this yesterday. It's important to understand that while the main Russian forces are still focused on clearing the Kursk region, the real question is, what happens when the Kursk region is fully liberated? Not only will SRGs cross the border, but so will the main Russian forces. The Ukrainian side fully understands this, which is why evacuation was ordered in nearby villages, all the way up to Yunikivka. As for the Kursk region itself, the final battles for the remaining villages are ongoing. Yesterday, for example, the clearing of a village located west of the Sudza agglomeration was completed. In addition, fighting was reported near Gogolevka. American cartographers have not yet updated their maps, so Gogolevka is still marked as being under Ukrainian control. But in reality, during yesterday's battles, the Ukrainian armed forces were forced out of this village. Some units retreated toward the checkpoint, others toward Oleshna. But even in Oleshna, battles have already begun. Yesterday, the Russian army advanced along the road leading toward the Sumy region, managing to push 3 kilometers forward and secure positions on the southern outskirts of Oleshna. By the way, the rumors about the Russian military command supposedly ordering not to engage the Ukrainian armed forces and to let them retreat from the Kursk region are complete nonsense. I literally posted footage of this in my Telegram channel yesterday. Just follow the link in the description and you'll see it for yourself. I can't show those images here, but they are from just yesterday. So, there has been no order to let the Ukrainian forces leave the Kursk region, and there won't be one. Surrendering, yes, that's possible. But creating an organized corridor to allow them to retreat to the Sumy region? That's not going to happen. By the end of this weekend, this entire territory will likely be under full control since Levka has been captured. Consequently, the entire area to the north is already a gray zone. And by the end of the day, I believe the clearing operation will be completed. The only issue left to resolve is with Oleshna, but considering that the assault on the village began yesterday, I expect some good news by the end of the day. Regarding Zelensky's statement, this thought actually came to me about 20 minutes before I started recording this video. So, here's the thing. Zelensky said yesterday that the Kursk operation had fulfilled its purpose. What purpose, you may ask? Apparently, stabilized the situation in the Kharkiv region. You know, this is such nonsense that it can be disproven with just one glance at the map. Let's take a closer look right now. Let's open the map and rewind to August 6, 2024, the day the Kursk invasion began. Now let's shift to the Pokrovsk front. Zelensky claimed that the situation was stabilized thanks to the Kursk operation. See this red dashed line? That's the line of contact as of August 6, 2024. Now tell me, Does this look like stabilization after the invasion? This enormous area, over 2,000 km superscript 2, has come under Russian control. Over 2,000 km superscript 2. While the Ukrainian Armed Forces (UF) were putting all their effort into the Kursk operation, managing to capture only the small town of Sudza and a few dozen villages that were eventually taken back, the Russian army, just on this section of the front, seized 2,000 km superscript 2. On top of that, the following cities were liberated: Volodar, Krasnohorivka, Kurikov, Hernyv, Ukrainsk, Selidov, Novohorodivka, and so on. That's a loss of 7 cities, about 100 villages, and 2,000 km superscript 2 on just one section of the front, the Pokrovsk front. And Zelensky calls this stabilization? Okay, let's say we've covered the Pokrovsk front. But there's also the Kharkiv region. While the UAF were focusing on the Kursk operation, the Dvyrchensky foothold was established, and Ukraine lost another 300 km superscript 2 there. And what did Ukraine get in return? Nothing. Now let's go back to the Kursk region. As of Saturday, the UAF is barely holding on to 3 villages and about 60 km superscript 2 of territory. By the end of this weekend, they won't even have that because the assault on Oleshna is already underway, and Russian forces are closing in on Gavo. I think the storming of that village will begin today. With the fall of Gavo, the Kursk foothold for the UF will collapse. There will be nothing left for them to hold on to. The outcome of a battle isn't determined at the beginning, it's determined at the end. And right now, the end has come for the UAF in the Kursk region. Summary asterisk. Russia has seized over 3,000 km superscript 2 of territory if we count all sections of the front. Ukraine ultimately gains nothing. Actually, not even nothing. Ukraine now faces additional problems in the Sumy region, which are only going to get worse very soon. But according to Zelensky, the Kursk operation stabilized the situation. The Ukrainian army is bravely fulfilling its mission to liberate the Kursk region. Only 60 km superscript 2 remain, and at the current pace, everything will likely be finished by the end of the weekend or early next week. The entire Kursk region will be liberated. What comes next? The situation on the front continues to develop rapidly. After the fall of Oleshna and Gavo, Russian forces have gained the opportunity to advance deeper into Ukrainian territory. Having secured their new positions, the Russian army has begun establishing a foothold for attacking the next lines of Ukrainian defense. The primary direction of movement is now toward Yunikivka and the surrounding villages. Capturing these settlements will open a direct route to major supply hubs and logistical centers of the Ukrainian armed forces in the northern part of the region. According to operational data, Russian forces have already formed several strike groups that are expected to launch large-scale offensive operations in the coming days. The Ukrainian armed forces, in turn, are trying to regroup but are facing serious difficulties with logistics and supplies. Units operating in this area are exhausted and have suffered heavy losses. Attempts to bring in reserves from the Kharkiv region are being hampered by damaged transportation routes due to destroyed bridges and constant strikes on ammunition depots. Following successes in the Kursk region, Russian forces have also launched active operations in the Sumy region. After the fall of Oleshna, the Russian army has increased pressure on Ukrainian positions along the entire front line. As a result, several more settlements have been liberated over the past 24 hours, forcing Ukrainian forces to retreat deeper into their territory. The situation is especially difficult for the Ukrainian armed forces near Bilopilya and Krasnopilya. Russian artillery is literally burning out enemy positions, leaving no chance for the Ukrainian armed forces to hold their ground. According to reports from the field, Ukrainian units have begun an urgent evacuation of the wounded and ammunition, abandoning heavy weaponry due to the inability to withdraw it. The capture of key settlements in the Kursk and Sumy regions has given Russian forces access to strategic roads and railway hubs. This will allow the rapid redeployment of reserves, equipment, and supplies, creating strong pressure on Ukrainian positions in neighboring areas. Control over communication routes also enables Russia to disrupt supply lines of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kharkiv region. Interruptions in fuel and ammunition supplies are already being reported, which is seriously affecting the combat readiness of Ukrainian units. Moreover, Russian forces have already begun using new routes to deliver equipment and reinforcements, which will allow them to increase the pace of their advance in the coming days. The stability of Ukraine's defense on the northern front is under serious threat. After the fall of the Kursk foothold, the Ukrainian armed forces have found themselves in an extremely disadvantageous position. Russian forces continue to apply pressure along the entire front line, giving the enemy no time to regroup. In a desperate attempt to hold their positions, the Ukrainian armed forces have started transferring forces from other sectors, including from the Pokrovsk and Sloviansk fronts. However, this weakens Ukrainian defenses in the east and south, creating vulnerable zones for further Russian advances. According to intelligence reports, the Ukrainian command is considering creating new defensive lines deeper inside its territory. However, the lack of resources and constant strikes on infrastructure make these plans extremely difficult to execute. Amid Russian successes in the Kursk and Sumy regions, the threat to Kharkiv is becoming increasingly evident. Russian forces have already approached the outskirts of the city and have begun artillery strikes on Ukrainian positions. According to operational reports, Russian forces are preparing a foothold for an assault on the northern districts of Kharkiv. The Ukrainian armed forces are trying to strengthen the city's defenses by pulling in the last available reserves. However, these measures appear to be more tactical in nature since the overall situation on the front is clearly not in Ukraine's favor. Russian forces continue to carry out precision strikes on Ukrainian military infrastructure. Over the past 24 hours, several ammunition and fuel depots have been destroyed, and key bridges and railway hubs have been demolished. This significantly complicates the supply chain for Ukrainian units on the front line and reduces their mobility. Special attention is being given to the destruction of Ukrainian air defense and electronic warfare systems. According to intelligence data, Russian forces have managed to suppress a significant portion of Ukrainian radar systems, making Ukrainian positions vulnerable to air and missile strikes. After the fall of the Kursk foothold and successes in the Sumy region, a real threat is emerging for the neighboring Poltava region. Russian forces may build on their success by advancing southward with the goal of encircling and blocking Ukrainian forces in the center of the country. The Ukrainian armed forces have already started pulling reserves into this area, but these forces are clearly insufficient to organize an effective line of defense. If the Russian army succeeds in this direction, the Ukrainian armed forces risk losing control over a significant part of central Ukraine. Russia's military successes are putting significant pressure on the Ukrainian leadership. After the failure of the Kursk operation and heavy losses in the Kharkiv and Sumy regions, discontent is growing within Ukraine's political circles. Western partners of Ukraine are increasingly expressing doubts about the success of Ukrainian forces and are demanding explanations for the failures. Some countries have already begun to scale back military aid programs, fearing that continued funding for the Ukrainian army will not yield the desired results. Against this backdrop, dissatisfaction with the leadership's policies is growing in Ukrainian society. Calls for ceasefire negotiations and a diplomatic resolution to the conflict are becoming more frequent. However, Ukrainian leadership continues to reject such proposals, insisting on the intention to continue fighting. The situation on the front over the next few weeks is likely to develop along two main scenarios. Continuation of Russian success on the northern front ***. Russian forces will continue advancing in the Sumy and Poltava regions, moving toward major cities and transport hubs. This will create a threat to the entire Ukrainian defense system in the northeast of the country. Attempt by the Ukrainian armed forces to stabilize the front ***. Ukrainian command will attempt to hold new defensive lines and launch counterattacks to contain the Russian advance. However, without significant military assistance from the West, these measures are unlikely to succeed. Thus, at the moment, the initiative on the front has completely shifted to Russian forces. Successes in the Kursk and Sumy regions have created favorable conditions for further advances. The Ukrainian armed forces are in a difficult position, and attempts to stabilize the front have so far failed. In the coming days, we can expect important events that could determine the future course of the conflict. Everything will depend on how effectively Russian forces can capitalize on their success and maintain the initiative on the battlefield. That's all I have for today's Frontline update. Wishing you a great weekend. See you tomorrow.